we are on our very last speaker, who's called Allan. So where is Allan? Allan is lovely. There he is. Hi, Allan.
Hello.
I'm going to start with a quote and then I'll introduce you, because I did that last time. I forgot to introduce her. So I love this. It says, it's by Rachel, how do you say that? Riemann?
Yes.
Perhaps the most important thing we ever give each other is our attention. A loving silence often has far more power to heal and connect than most well-intentioned words. I love that. Sometimes you think, oh my gosh, I've got to say something, I've got to do something, and actually being is just resting and being comfortable.
Absolutely. I
It's
mean,
beautiful.
I think, the quote really, caught my attention as I was writing my book, that as a reminder that for so many, our discomfort can sometimes, in our conversations with our teenagers, we sometimes feel the pressure that there's like something that needs to be said or something that needs to be done. And I think so oftentimes a silent strength sitting next to you can be so powerful and supportive of our teens.
Right, so let me just explain who Allan is. So Allan is a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. He practices as an openly gay therapist, and finds meaning and purpose by helping LGBTQ plus children, teens, and adults figure out their own journey towards healing, acceptance, and self-love. And he's the author of this book here. So welcome, Allan. It's really lovely to have you. Allan is really sweet, guys. He checked in with me and he really wants to help you. So
thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so a lot of parents seem to feel they're treading on eggshells when they talk with their children, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't seem to matter if how their children are identifying. They seem to be getting caught up in the language, and therefore they're feeling just not very confident. Even when it comes to, like, when I say, oh, like, my car's a girl, there's like, oh, how do you know, why is your car female? And I'm like, because she is. They're picking up on the smallest little things. So how can we help our children to see that there is a reason sometimes to have that, I don't want to call it an argument, but to have the conversation around gender and stuff, and then there is times when it really doesn't matter.
Yes. Well, I think that you bring up a very important point. I do want to acknowledge that teenage years are so developmentally difficult for teenagers themselves. And so to hear you say how so many parents lack the confidence, they're unsure in how to engage in meaningful conversation. This is a very important aspect of so many family relationships. And I want for your audience to know that this is not a unique or individualized struggle. I think that we are also in a time when there's so much movement and changes going on socially. I don't know how they are there in Great Britain, but I would imagine them to be quite similar to here in the States, where we're introduced to pronouns, and how is it that teenagers are wanting to be referenced so that it most appropriately and accurately references, validates them, and recognizes how they might identify in their gender orientation or their gender identity. And so I do think that being available and just allowing yourself in a space to both learn and grow together is so valuable.
Yeah, I think some of the parents are worried about, they're the parent, they're child has always looked to them for having answers. And in this situation, like I'm not quite sure if anybody does have any answers, which is why I like that quote. It's not about having an answer. It's just about, okay, we can sit with it. We can not talk about it. We can talk about it. We can, rather than taking the pressure off it.
Sure. I think that a good place for parents to start, and when I talk about parents, I do want to recognize that there are different parental figures. I'm not solely talking only about biological or blood-like related parents, as there are so many forms that families take these days. They can have like two dads, they can have two moms.
Grandparents can look after them.
Yes, sometimes biological parents, for whatever reason, are not there. And so they have a relative placement, or they have a grandparent, or they're in foster care or in a group home. And so in recognizing that whatever form your parental role may take, I think that recognizing and having a degree of self-compassion that you don't have to have all the answers all the time. I find that many teenagers just want to feel like their parents are a safe place to fall, to be with, and that even if they don't have the answers, it is okay to say, I don't know, but let's go find out. Let's go research this together. And that can be a very meaningful and loving act that any parental figure can do to support their LGBTQIA teen.
So this was a question, and I've also experienced this. So it's what do I do when my teenager makes me feel like I'm against them when I'm not? They automatically think that you're going to say something, and they get defensive before you have said anything. They just assume.
Well, I think this question, brings up several different thoughts to like my mind as like I've, played back different situations that I've worked with families with. I think what this to some degree speaks to is the teenagers or the child's own discomfort. Maybe they themselves are feeling a certain level of anxiety or sadness or discomfort. And so when a parent, as well-intended as they may be in trying to reach out and trying to connect, what they might be experiencing is that teenager messaging in the best way that they know how, because they may not necessarily have the necessary skills to be able to say, mom, dad, I'm not very comfortable, talking about this right now. And so what a parent often will experience is, well, I try to engage with my teenager, but they are shutting their door. They're always like isolating in the room. And I think that if your teenager is making you feel a certain way, how about as like a parental figure, you check in and say, hey, I try my very best to try to, make sure that that I'm there for you, that I'm here as support. But I sometimes kind of feel that, you feel like I'm not on your team, that I'm not on your side. And is there something that I can do differently? Is there something that I do? Is there something that I say? Can you help me be better for you? And just listen and see what they say. I think most teenagers are willing to, tell their parents, well, I just need like my space. I just need to be able to, be like my own person. I need to be okay with, teenagers can be, rather moody. Like in the morning, they are like totally fine.
Yep.
And then by the time they get home from school, something happened at school that the parent doesn't know about, and they're irritable, they're angry. And like a parent's like, why are you so angry? Why? And it's just, again, it's about, creating that space of allowing them to just be in their emotions and to like know that they aren't there that you are there as a support.
Because you can be as gentle and as open sentenced as you can possibly be, and they still say, stop harassing me, and you're going, well, I'm not harassing you.
Yeah, and I think,
Like,
I think sometimes parents need to ask themselves, like, why is it that I need to be there for my child or my teen in a certain way? Why am I feeling a certain level of insecurity or self-consciousness about how I'm parenting? What does the parents need? Again, I want to recognize that for any parental figure, that their intentions are come from a place of love and care. But it's like really about how can you speak and communicate that in a way that your teenager will receive that and see that.
So it's a challenge to be more aware of your own feelings as a parent, to see as in, like, is it my need or is it their need, or is it just something I've always done because I've always done it?
Absolutely. I think, when I work with parents in my therapy room, I often will hear their story. What was their relationship with, like, their own parents? What were some of their experiences? Because I think that when we can reflect on our own life experiences that shape us even in our current day life, that will also influence how we engage with our children and our teenagers. And so it can be a valuable insight for a parent to take moments to, like, okay, what is this about? Why am I feeling this way?
I like in your book that you give, and I'm not quite sure if I've read it right, but you give young people like different exercises they can do to feel calm and confident for themselves. And I'm kind of thinking, I wonder if a parent reads it and they think, oh, that's for the young person to do, not for me. But actually the book is full of, it's almost like you're reading it for yourself as well as you're reading it for your child or for whoever it is you're reading it for. So it's as much true for you as it is for them. So you talk about connecting with yourself, rediscovering, accepting, noticing the positives. That could be as much for me as it could be for, my child. So it doesn't really matter, does it?
I mean, I really did, in writing this book, I wanted for parents who, as you so noted when we first started, that so many parents feel unsure. There is like no map or clear instructions on how to respond or how to support your LGBTQ teen, much less just the general phase of parenting. I want to recognize that it's very difficult. And so being as like a parent, being able to just recognize that there are things that we can do that can support our connection and our empowering, as well as like our understanding of our strengths, as well as like our limits as parents, and just have like a willingness to learn and be better.
So actually one of the dads asked me this question. So they said they see more and more young people questioning their sexuality, and it feels like society's putting a lot of pressure on young people to decide what they are, rather than just being like, you have to say what you are. You have to say which camp almost you stand in.
Yes. Well, I think to that question or that point, I think as humans, we have a natural tendency to want to, in our efforts to understand, we want to simplify. And I think along the journey that parents will go through, the discomfort, the anxiety, the lack of sureness that you were addressing earlier, I think that often provokes or pushes parents to want to just get to the finish line. I just want to stop feeling unsure. I just want to get this problem or this like emotion resolved, because I don't like feeling insecure. I don't like feeling like I'm not being a loving, caring parent. I want to have like a place in my child's life. And so when it comes to the pressures that you're speaking to, I think that it's worth recognizing that it's not only the parent, it's also the teenager. And so when you can take a step back and recognize that it truly is a developmental phase in a teenager's life, in all of our lives. It's when, we learned about social norms. We learned how to socialize with our peers. We learned what it's like to be different, to be like ourselves. And ultimately, the goal is to get to that finish line where your teenager is confident in who they really are. And so I think maybe validating and recognizing that there may be pressures to identify, but I do think that it's so important for parents to also understand that it is like a journey. So, sometimes with some teenagers at a certain phase in their teenage years, they will have same-sex experiences, but they will not identify as being bi or pan or any other gender orientation or sexual orientation. And then maybe like later in their life, they come to discover, wow, I am really attracted to a female or opposite sex if they identify as if their identity is male. And so I think, again, just allowing and recognizing that it is a journey. And I encourage parents to just try to relax just like a little bit, because it is a journey that both the teenager and parent takes together, hopefully.
And if as an adult, I remember being a teenager, it was there are those times when you can't tell where the line is between I really fancy you and I really admire you, I really like you, and I'm really attracted to that's all, you're figuring it all out. It's just like, there isn't like a course on how to figure it out. You just have to muddle your way through it with everybody else muddling their way through it. And that's okay, isn't it? Because if you're really honest with yourself, we all felt that. I felt that.
Yes, and I think, there are so many societal pressures, even in 2021, especially with social media, where it can be a platform where so many thoughts and opinions can be expressed. I do think that as parents, I think that it's important to be able to, think about what is like my goal? What am I trying to achieve? What is important to me in my connection with my teen, and allow for that to be sort of kind of like a goalpost or a guiding light in how you engage, how you speak, when you check in, when you give space. And I think that is, something to, also consider.
Okay, next question. So, gender, sexuality, and equality are all high profile at the moment, which is right. So the parents saying, I can't help feeling that my children are saying they are gender fluid just because they want to fit in, because it's like fashionable, basically. And does it matter if that's true or not true? I don't think it does, but anyway.
Well, my thought around that is maybe for some, it is actually, their effort or their experience to try to fit in. But what I will say, for the large majority of teenagers, recognizing that there are moments when you have this feeling towards someone of the same gender, and you're not quite sure what this means, because in our TV shows, in our movies, in the messaging that we get from our parents, from extended family, from society is, oh, this is not how you should be. This is not okay. And so I do think that there is a lot of attention that's being placed on this, particularly with like the trans community. It's a community that I'm so empathetic and sensitive towards, because it's one thing to be LGBTQ, but then for whatever reason, when you add in an added layer of transphobia, when you add like another layer of pronouns and how one, you know, orients themselves or their identity, I do think that there's a lot of strong feelings. And I think when it comes to the LGBTQ community and teenagers, it's just so important to be able to let them know that it is like okay, and that they don't necessarily need to be in such a rush to identify and to sort of, you know, lock themselves into a specific gender identity or orientation.
So I have a question about sports and about teenage girls playing with transgenders. I don't even know how to phrase it. I'm really sorry, Allan. You know, when the opposite, I don't even know. I don't know any good way of saying it. But when let's say genetically born boys are playing in the teenage girls football team, and there seems to be some disparity around, is that fair, is that not fair? Some parents, there's a lot on the football field, it's very interesting, but nobody says anything. You know, they'll say it quietly, but they will never say it in the group. And not the kids aren't saying anything, it's the parents.
Certainly, I think you bring up a topic and a question that has had quite a bit of controversy internationally. I think if what we're speaking to is how as parents, how as a community, how do we support transgender teenagers or those
or people just working it out, you know, they haven't really decided, but they decided enough to change football teams, you know, but they...
Yes. I think ultimately, it is so important. And I think that the challenge that so many transgender, as well as like others along the LGBTQ spectrum, is they want to be accepted for who they are. And they want to feel that in their own identity and orientation, that they are able to, in sports, that they are entitled to the same opportunities as anyone else. Again, I think the important point to focus on is, what is a teen's gender identity and orientation, and how do you honor that? How do you support them in being seen and accepted and affirmed?
Yeah, I wonder if people across the board struggle with that, because you don't want to crush anybody, but this is how to have that conversation, not just as a parent, even as a sports coach, because you need to figure it out at some point. But it seems like people are just going, okay, well, that's what you say you are. We're not going to discuss it. We're just going to put you in a different group. And like, if you really want to help support that young person, then you need to ask the difficult questions. You need to be confident and comfortable enough to do that. So how if you're a parent and you can see that happening, how can you help?
So I think, first of all, I think letting your teenager know that you are there and accept them for who they are and how they identify, letting them know that you love them and support them. I think one of the biggest ways that parents can message their support is by getting involved. Go out and learn. Go out and participate in organizations that are affirming of LGBTQ teens and athletes. Those sorts of efforts, in addition to being able to say, I don't know, but how can I support you? Let's work on this together. Those are expressions of love and care that are going to be the most important, because in the world that we live in, where there is so much criticism and judgment, the last thing you would want is for your teenager to feel that from their own, within like their own home or their community. So when parents stand up for their LGBTQ teens, whether it's in schools, whether it's sports, when they can be an advocate for them, it sends like a positive message that is affirming and strengthening of your teen.
And then what if you're not that child's parent, but you're a parent of another child in the team, and it's like people are talking about it in a very hush-hush way? How do you, without, it's that thing, and you need to be brave enough just to say something, even though you might get kind of shot down a bit.
Well, I think this is kind of where the value of community is so important, particularly one that is affirming and validating of LGBTQ teens. So as parents, recognize that not just your own children, but other people are watching you. And so I think part of what is my book and when I envision like my work with teenagers and parents is I want for teenagers to get to a place in their life where regardless of how they identify or who they are, that they can love themselves and find strength in who they are. And that includes their voice. So when parents can role model, or when friends, when family can role model affirming behavior and recognition, that sends like a message. And it not only sends a message to the teenager, but it also sends a message to the community that, hey, this is like not okay. And so when parents, when adults, when members of the community can stand up alongside our LGBTQ teens and support them in any way that they feel is right for them, that is strengthening not just the individual, but the community at large.
Cool. So I have one last question, and it is, at what point is it okay for a parent to say to their child, so I can't, what do you call it when a child presents one day as a girl and then as a boy, wears makeup, then doesn't, it's like, so we have a few young people like that.
Well, I think the point that I'd like to emphasize with your question, and I think it's such an important question, I think asking them, how do you want me to refer to you? How do you identify? And of course, you want to consider the developmental language, because certainly, the exploration or the journey towards finding your gender identity, sexual orientation is not necessarily one that's just for teenagers. There's children as young as toddler age who are very clear in their gender identity. And so I think in an effort to not only recognize, but also support, parents can ask. So I do want to take a step back, and I want to, again, recognize that children and teenagers are trying to figure it out themselves. And so when I hear you say, one day my child wants to wear makeup, or one day, my child identifies with, being attracted to the same gender, but then like the next day they're not. I think that the point where parents should engage in a conversation is when they see changes or abrupt behaviors that are of concern. Have their grades slipped? Okay. Are you finding that they are more irritable or they're more isolating? I think the bigger question of, is a child or teenager thriving? And I think that if your child is thriving and there are no behaviors or events of concern, then I think it's okay for a parent to step back. And I think when you can make yourself available, you can show your child and teenager that you love them and that you care for them and you support them. Allow for them, sometimes parents can be, because of their care, they can be a bit too assertive in being available. And sometimes we just need to allow our teenagers a space to come to us.
That's a brilliant answer, because you're right. If there's nothing detrimental happening, and sometimes when you are the parents, then you're so into everything, you're so in it, you can't see almost the wood for the trees. You could just see, and so you're right. If the grades aren't slipping and friends are still there and everything else is quite like it ever was, then yeah, that's a really, really helpful answer. Thank you.
To your point, I think even in learning and having your children's friends over who may be on the LGBT spectrum, allowing a warm space that your friends are giving them a message that your friends are welcome. And, so-and-so, you can refer them by their name, but how does Sam identify? How should I reference them? Do I call them she, he, they, Z? There's so many different pronouns right now, but I think when we can check in with our teenager and ask questions and just be curious and have our ears, open and to learn, you're in a good place as a parent.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Allan. I also just want to add that I've worked with some of the older teenagers, like in their late teens, early 20s, and I love it because they seem to have worked it out and they are happy to tell you anything, and they laugh if you get it wrong. It's not a big deal.
I want to recognize that everyone has their journey. Not everyone lives in a big community where there's lots of resources. Some people live in smaller towns. Maybe they're disconnected. Maybe they live in a community that is, the majority is very conservative or very traditional in their views. And so I think for parents to, utilize technology, utilize community resources, being able to be open to learn and grow and just walk alongside your teenager. Have faith that, you're doing a great job, you're doing the best that you know how, and that as long as you embrace an attitude or an approach of continuously learning and strengthening, it's going to all work out.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Allan. We have run out of time, but that's brilliant. And your book actually says so much. So and you're right, just look up the resources, and I love this. Just take a step back and breathe and acknowledge that they are safe and they are loved. Ultimately, that's all you want, isn't it? You want your child to feel safe and feel loved
for who they are.
For who they are, yeah. And if that's it, then everything else is just little bits that will figure itself out in time.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Allan. Enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate your time.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. You take care. Okay,
bye.
bye.
Esther.
Bye.